All right, hi everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Ask an Academic. I'm Josh Begbie. With me here is Dr. Anthony Hopkins. He's a senior lecturer at the law school. He teaches evidence crim and he's also a barrister, which hopefully we'll get to talk about later. How's it going, Anthony?
Good, Josh. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no worries. So one thing I'd like to take you back to first is your time in the law school. You didn't go to the law, you went to ANU later in your law career.
I finished actually at Queensland University of Technology, but I started out at University of Wollongong. And so it's going some time back now, but I still have pretty vivid experiences of what it was like to start out in law.
Right, so I'm coming to the end of my degree here, and I suppose what I'd love to know is when you were finishing up in your fourth or fifth year, say, what were the sort of opportunities that you were looking for that you can reflect back on now and really appreciate?
Well, I think that my degree was really broken into those two stages, being at Wollongong and then being at QUT. And what happened at the end of my third year at Wollongong is that I went off to do a work experience placement in Alice Springs at Central Australian Aboriginal Legal Aid. And that had been a culmination of a number of things, particularly learning criminal law and kind of being fascinated by the pathways that people come to the criminal justice system by, and then also the gross injustices faced by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians. And that led me to a placement, and in fact that placement was very central in terms of determining what I wanted to do later. And so that in a sense meant that my last 2 years were perhaps more focused, less just learning and kind of finding my feet, and more, okay, now I know what I need to know to some extent. And so in a sense study became easier once I found that focus.
Right, I think that's something that certainly resonates for me, and I think for a lot of law students, in that advocacy for people who are disadvantaged by the law is something that lead a lot of people to study law, and it's particularly at the end of a degree, you know, when there's clerkships and things like that going around, you can lose focus there. So how important do you think it is to actually get out there and sort of pursue that?
Well, I think it's crucial, and I think, like you just said, Josh, a lot of students come to the law school and to law learning with an idea that they're there, they want to help, they particularly want to help people that are disadvantaged, and perhaps they can see that they might be in a more privileged position and have that sense of responsibility. But it's very vague at that point. And so what doing some work by way of work experience or clinical placements does is it really puts you on the ground and with people. And so you then realise, well, hold on, this is how my legal skills can actually benefit others. And I think that then has a whole feedback loop into the way you learn. So on one level, the sooner you can have some kind of engagement on the ground with people and realise the power of your law skills and your legal learning, the easier it then becomes to continue through and maintain that purpose. And if it is your purpose to help vulnerable and underprivileged, then that also allows you to go, okay, well, clerkships are for some people, but it may not be the path for me. My path is this, and there are so many possible paths. It's really about thinking, well, which one is going to work for me, will be fulfilling, but also one that I can really deliver some value into the world with.
And it's a question I imagine you wrestle with your whole career.
Absolutely. And in fact, I haven't really had a single career, if you like. I've stepped between practice and teaching. And partly that's around what works and fits with who I am as a person, but it's also guided very much by what difference do I feel I can make for other people, whether it's directly for clients in court or in terms of saying to students, you know, these are the possibilities with your law degree, this is why it matters, and these are the things that I think matter in terms of your learning, so you can take it forward and put it into action.
So I'd just like to pause on that point you made there about having multiple careers. You're a barrister, as I mentioned in the introduction. Can you talk me through how you got to that point in your career?
So I started out at Aboriginal Legal Aid in Alice Springs, so I did work experience there. And then at the end of my law degree, I wanted to go back and work at Aboriginal Legal Aid. And I couldn't get it in immediately, but I found a place at Northern Territory Legal Aid in Alice Springs. We had lots of Aboriginal clients as well, and it was a very close-knit legal community. So I then worked for 2 years at NT Legal Aid before moving to Aboriginal Legal Aid. And then in a career change, I took 3 years off to raise kids. I had young kids at that point. And so I actually worked as a disability teacher's aide, talking in terms of moving careers around. And that was fantastic. It was really outside the legal space, but really working in a hands-on way. But it also, after a time, persuaded me that I had a whole lot of legal learning, and that that actually I could contribute more by putting that legal learning into effect.
Right.
And so that took me to academia, to teaching first at University of Canberra, which was a wonderful opportunity. But perhaps lo and behold, I got itchy feet to be back face to face with clients, be they in the prison or in the cells or in my office, preparing for court. And so I took the bar exam and joined the private bar here in the ACT. So I did that full time for about 4 years, and then again found that there were certain aspects of that I enjoyed, but certain aspects I didn't love and didn't suit me in the way that perhaps practicing in Aboriginal legal aid had, or in the way that teaching also offered opportunities to engage with people. So I then had an opportunity to move to the ANU to teach criminal law and evidence, and I took that opportunity, and I find myself here 3 years in.
I'm going to reveal myself as a bit of a nerd here.
Yeah,
you wrote a paper in 2009 that sort of draws on this experience here about the importance of teaching practically, particularly with evidence law. And now I've also had the pleasure of taking one of your evidence classes. I think that really comes through in the way you teach.
Well, yeah, look, it certainly does, and this is this ongoing link between theory and practice, if you like, or learning and practice. And so that the premise of evidence, the way I teach it, is that it's not until you get to your feet as a lawyer in court, with a client beside you, or if you're the prosecutor with the community's interests that you're holding, that you actually see how the rules of evidence operate, and that your learning actually matters. And so with that understanding, and that was a common experience, there were many practitioners that I met that said, wow, I didn't really get evidence until I was up there. And then realistically, it's not too late, but you're at the point when you really need to know this stuff because it matters. So the premise of the course is to bring that experience of getting up on your feet to the law school and put students in that in a simulated mock trial environment, so that they become the prosecution and defence lawyer, and that they are responsible for the narrative that emerges in that courtroom and applying the rules of evidence. Now, the consequences matter in the mark book, but they don't matter in terms of the client or the community, and so it's a way of getting into the coalface, I suppose, of practice.
Well, it's how I imagine people see law school when they want to sign up. When you rock up on day one, you think you're going to be standing up in front of class and making these arguments, and then, for better or for worse, you realise that most of it is reading and making sort of slower increments towards that.
Look, I think that's right. That inspires a lot of people, the idea that this is a dynamic human dispute resolution mechanism taking place in this courtroom, and students get inspired to be involved. But I think not just that, also, even if you don't want to practice, actually getting involved in a simulation allows you to really then take a position and critique what's wrong about our system of dispute resolution and what might be unjust about trials, or what narratives are being squashed in that process.
Yeah.
So it gives you an access in and a critique point, even if you don't ever want to go on and be a practicing defence lawyer or practicing a lawyer in court.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think out of so many skills that you learn at law school, legal research, how to write a problem question or answer a problem question, standing up and advocating is one that maybe we don't learn as much.
Look, I think that's right, and unfortunately sometimes that's down to numbers, that we're dealing with large student numbers these days in most law schools, but wherever we can find moments where we can put the practical aspect in, I think it's really important. And there's something critical about being able to crystallise an argument within the space of a minute for somebody who's playing that role of judge, and being able to be persuasive about that argument, that brings a lot of that other learning that you do that we might describe as more theoretical draws upon all of that learning and allows you to see where the synergies are with all of it.
Absolutely. So one question I think would be interesting to ask all academics as part of this exercise is, in your field, in your research, where do you see as the front line or the cutting edge, or somewhere that really students can focus on and realise that this is an area of law that is going to be changing in the near future?
Well, look, for me, although I teach criminal law and evidence law, my focus is broader. It's the criminal justice system and really injustices there. And it seems to me that there are really two intersecting issues that are very, very significant for me, and I think is very significant for our society, and that is increasing incarceration rates. So, and our society's seeming obsession, if you like, with dealing with our fears of crime by locking more and more people away in ways that are often actually counterproductive, and in ways that fail to recognise that, in fact, many of those people that are being locked away, if we go back and explore their stories, as you do when you're a defence lawyer, talking to people who are facing court, if we go back and explore their stories, many of those were victims as children, or many of those had experiences which really caused them to be in the positions they are in today. And so what we have at the moment is increasing incarceration rates without regard for understanding why people might be in the positions they're in, and really with a counterproductive result that that we put more and more people in prison and ultimately make them often more likely to continue to commit crimes rather than addressing the issues that might have taken them there. So it's that, but then on top of that, it's also the experience of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians in the justice system. And we know that if you walk into any prison in Australia, on average, you'll have close to 30% of those in custody will be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, even though they make up less than 3% of the population. So we can see that our policies in the criminal justice system, and in fact our policies more generally, are leading to disadvantage being replicated and continued over and over again through that justice system. So it seems to me we need to look at different ways of dealing with this, and that's a responsibility not just for sociologists, not just for politicians, but also for lawyers, and they often have the knowledge of what it's really like on the ground, and they are often the custodians of the stories of the individual people. And we're dealing with individuals, each of whom matters. And so in that sense, we have both a privileged space and a position to stand on when we talk about these issues.
Yeah, I think we could talk about that for another half an hour, but I think that's all the time we have. So
All right.
my thanks to Dr. Anthony Hopkins.
Josh.
And tune in next week for another episode of Ask an Academic. Cheers.